As discussions at the Synod drone on, the discussion of a Dubia answer just before the Synod is heating up, with the Swiss bishop dropping some truth bombs. Join us with the latest from the Eternal City Church Militant's Rome correspondent, Dr. Jules Gomes. Jules, before getting into the latest minutiae on the Synod, a retired Swiss bishop is making headlines and excoriating the response made to the Dubia that went public on the eve of the Synod. Who is he and what is he saying?
Brad, Bishop Marian Eleganti is the retired auxiliary bishop of the Diocese of Tours in Switzerland. And he's come out with all guns blazing directly at Pope Francis. He is quoting Jesus' words in the Gospels in response to Pope Francis's rather long responses to the questions, the Dubia sent by the 5 cardinals. And he basically tells Pope Francis, hey, Jesus said, let your yes be yes and your no be no. And anything beyond that comes from evil. The long answers to the Dubia recently presented by 5 cardinals, he says, cannot stand up to the standard of Jesus' words.
Wow, that's pretty tough take on that now. So what's his specific problems with that response that came from the dicastery, the Doctrine of the Faith that Pope Francis signed off on, saying that one size answer, you just can't do that, one size answer doesn't fit all, and that each pastor has to decide for himself, say, whether to bless same-sex unions or not?
Well, he's kind of deconstructing what seems to be a postmodern narrative in Pope Francis's responses to the Dubia. And what Bishop Eleganti is saying, he's asking, are there no longer any truths that are eternal and universally valid? Does the modern age mean that we now need to take these truths, revise them, and apply them situationally to, small groups in different situations according to their needs? And so basically these truths no longer remain eternal, no longer remain universal truths, but they have been modified and therefore they have lost their potential as truths.
Yeah, object what you're doing and why you're doing it and the circumstances around that. Seems like all we focus on today is the circumstances and not the intrinsic evils upstream of that. He had some pretty simple truths regarding human nature. Can you tell us about those?
Well, he said very powerfully, the homosexuality, transsexuality, surrogacy, heterology, artificial conception and child trafficking in the case of infertility, and polygamy contradict the God-ordained order of creation and are objectively sinful. And this is where he's talking about those truths that always, perennially remain valid for all human beings, no matter what culture or background you come from. And he says homosexual unions cannot be blessed because God does not bless objectively sinful behavior, but always forgives the subjectively repentant sinner. Beautifully put.
So now, what about the same-sex couples who merely come for a blessing or maybe seek forgiveness, say in a confessional? What does he say about that?
Well, he says, come by all means, but come with a repentant heart, come with remorse, come seeking God's forgiveness, come with a willingness to change your life and adapt it to what God demands of you. Jesus says, take my yoke upon me and learn from me. And what he's calling repentant sinners to do in the confessional is to accept God's grace and begin to walk according to God's commands.
Jules, that's something we all have to do no matter what sinful, proclivity we have. And that pretty much seems like first-year catechism stuff. you need to have contrition for your sins, which presupposes a firm purpose of amendment. If you don't want to stop living a gay lifestyle, then you're not really open to forgiveness, which really in covering the pro-gay movement from bake my cake to bless my civil union, it seems that what those living in a gay lifestyle really want is affirmation in that lifestyle, and that by blessing them, a priest is actually giving them that scandalous affirmation. Your thoughts?
Brad, this is not affirmation. This is, in a sense, condemnation. Many years ago, I read a book by the famous psychiatrist, Dr. Jeffrey Satinover. It was published in 1996 by Baker. And it was one of the best books of the times. You know, even the congressional record said that this is the best book on homosexuality written thus far. What Dr. Satinover, a medical doctor, says, he says he has seen the tragedy of lives destroyed by homosexual activity. And in that book, very carefully footnoted, linked reference to medical journals, he lists at least 30 major illnesses that male anal homosexuality causes, and many of them are life-threatening illnesses. It was so tragic to read. I picked up all that stuff and did a lecture on it myself. And I asked people, well, once upon a time, you would say to people, stop smoking. Smoking is bad for you. Would you say the same thing to a homosexual? Because homosexuality is bad for you. And if you truly love somebody, you will not want what is bad for the person, but what is good for the person. And this is what the hierarchs in the Vatican are simply not willing to understand.
And how much more to want their eternal salvation, where all of us have to not be breaking the Ten Commandments in a mortal fashion. It's really lack of shepherding. Let's break away for a moment and get to the Synod. What's happening there or not happening there?
Yesterday, we had a press conference, and Paolo Ruffini, who is prefect of the Dicastery for Communications, was asked a number of questions. He kind of told journalists, don't expect too much. Don't expect to see the end goal right now. That is what you journalists always want to do. He also was unable to answer 3 or 4 very important questions from journalists, Brad. And it led people to, wonder what on earth is going on. But then he did explain that this is going to be a rather laborious process. All the participants have been divided according to languages into 35 small groups, or circoli minores, and each group consists of about 10 to 12 participants, and they are, each of them is given 4 minutes to talk, and then they are poring over word by word, discussing the working document that has been given to them. That was the result of the collated reports from all over the world. So he's not promising immediate results. We don't know if we are going to have, a daily as it were, tallies of what has been discussed, and a conclusion has been arrived at on this topic or on that topic. That most certainly it's almost certain that is not going to happen.
Yeah, and that whole lifetime gag order on everybody really still is rocking me, that we can never ever know during the Francis papacy anyway what actually was discussed there. That's just beyond the pale. Well, thank you for sharing that with the update. What was Eleganti's take on this synodal process?
Eleganti has been speaking against the synodal process from the very beginning. And last year he said this. He said, all the same refrains reheated for the upteenth time since the 1970s. Democracy, participation, involvement in power, women in all offices, diaconate or priesthood for women, revision of sexual morality regarding extramarital sex, remarriage and homosexuality, abandoning priest-centeredness in liturgy, etc., etc. As the author of the book of Ecclesiastes says, there's nothing new under the sun. And this sort of thing is coming up again and again and again.
I said something about the hippies came to power. What was your phrase about the last gasp?
Oh, well, this synod certainly seems to be the last gasp of the hippies, one last puff of cannabis before they depart this life.
And we mean by that the ones who were kind of formed in the 60s and early 70s with some of that political aspects there. And also, it doesn't take away the fact that they're validly in office, but their formation even was something that Benedict XVI called into question, a generation of malformed bishops. Well, if the recent...
Well, it was an all you need is love theology, wasn't it, Brad?
Yeah, I lived through it every Sunday. Don't be a Pharisee and love everyone. They never defined love, and Pharisee was anything that was external. Every single Mass at Sunday. So, well, if the recent responses to the Cardinal's Dubia, the current Synod on synodality and the past 10 years of the Francis papacy could all be summed up in a single word, that word would be confusion. The Pope wanted to make a mess. History will surely give him credit for doing just that. Jules, thank you so much for bringing us a little clarity to help calm the sea of confusion.
Thank you, Brad.
Thanks again for watching today's episode of Rome Dispatch. This show is brought to you by donors like Real Estate for Life. If you're looking to buy or sell a home and want to support our mission, visit realestateforlife.org. Again, that's realestateforlife.org. Be sure to tell them Church Militant sent you. God bless.